Welcome, everybody, to our podcast. It's so good. It's been a while since we've all met. My name is Laura Barr. I'm the owner and founder of Emerging Educational Consultant, and our mission every day is to grow good humans. And what better way to do that than by information and education? I am so delighted today to have, again, for the second time, Richard Malkin, who is someone I met at, I think we met at HECA, right? Was it a
We
HECA?
did, yes, that's right.
We did, and I think I connected right away with what you are up to. And what I want you to do is to dive in right away and talk about who you are, talk about the book that you wrote, and what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Laura, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for attending or listening to this podcast. My name is Bob Malkin. I'm a professor of the practice of biomedical engineering and global health, Emeritus at Duke University. And I've been at Duke for about 20 years now. The topic that we're going to be talking about today is research for high school students. I do have a book on the topic, as Laura mentioned. It's called Academic Research for High School Students, a guide to academic research for high school students. And it covers, all the aspects from, finding a lab job, getting the most out of your lab job, publishing, presenting, everything that you need to know as a high school student, including some of the dangers and risks that you take when you're spending time and effort and potentially producing research at a lab. It's available, by the way, on Amazon as well as the IRI website. So I also am the academic director of the International Research Institute of North Carolina, which is an organization that places high school students in remote research opportunities.
Well, it really is an honor to have you and to take time over the holiday season to spend 30 minutes with us. I think it is a really important topic for me because as someone who's been in the field for a long time, this idea and this topic of should I do research and what does that even mean for a student and what are the benefits and why would people do it? And we often talk in our practice about this idea of growing good humans, and we're not just getting into college, or we're not doing the things we do in high school just to trophy hunt. We're doing things because we are curious and excited, and that those things may propel us forward to more competitive applications. But how are we going to spend the minutes? So, I've heard a lot of students say, I've heard conducting academic research is going to up-level my college application. What kind of research are people talking about when they talk about this? And what does it mean to publish or research? Just break it down to the tiniest parts for us.
Yeah, it's a great question because I do think a lot of people get confused. They've heard research, they've heard the topic, or they've heard, Harvard says it's going to make their application more attractive, or Duke says so, or whatever. So let's start with the basic question. What is it? What is the research? What is it that people are talking about? Absolutely, it's academic research. You mentioned academic research. It is academic research, sometimes called scholarly research, as opposed to research you might do before you go shopping for something online, or research you might do for a paper at high school, a biology paper, or something like that. There are three critical components for research. First of all, it has to be systematic. So you have to have a method. Even if all you're doing is literature review, you have to have some systematic approach to what you're doing. The idea here is that you are so systematic about it and your description is so detailed that anyone else could reproduce what you did, every step, every search you did, everything, and get exactly the same results. The second thing that's critical for research is that you're using primary sources. Primary sources varies by field, but some things which are clearly not primary sources are like Google or Wikipedia, or a book that you found at the library, review articles that you may find online or at a journal. These are all secondary sources. Primary sources in my field, I'm a biomedical engineer. As I mentioned, my field, it's journal articles published in peer-reviewed, archived, and back factor-rated journals. But in other areas, it could be original artworks, diaries, log books. Each field of endeavor is going to have its own concept of what a primary source is, but you need to be using primary sources. For the most part, you need a mentor to teach you what is a primary source in the area that you're researching. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly and especially for high school students, it has to be written up in a technical or scientific method, a scientific approach to the writing. In other words, the writing has to be very specific and very traceable. So you have to avoid words like big, important, primary, secondary, things which are not clearly defined, or you need to define them in your work. And you need to be citing previous work so that we can arrive at the same conclusion that you did, perhaps adding in your data with previous data to reach a conclusion. If you don't have these three pieces in your work, if it's not systematic, if it's not using primary sources, and if the writing is not technically rigorous, it's not academic research.
That seems like a tall order. How do students find mentors? And is it possible, in your view, for a student to take this on without mentorship? Let me give you an example. I have a student who's like, well, I have my own research I'm doing right now. Like, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to do this. He had some big ideas about some drones, and he was going to conduct his own research, and he was going to write a paper. And I was trying to say to him, and I might be right or wrong, I'm like, I think that's more of like a passion project more than it is calling it research. So let me go back to the original question. Can people do research? Students, high school students, do it on their own? Must they have mentorship? And really, ultimately, Bob, is like, how do these students get to that point? And do they have to pay? Is it a pay for play? How does all that come together?
Yeah, a lot of good questions there, Laura. Let me kind of answer them in kind of pieces. The first one is perhaps the most important and the simplest. No. If any student says to me, not just a high school student, a PhD student, a postdoc in my lab, an undergraduate, if they approach me and say, I'm doing this project, I'm doing my own research, I've got this set up, my immediate reaction is do not do that. There are a lot of laws in the US that govern conducting of research. And the chance that you know all of those are called compliance issues, the chance that you will meet all the compliance issues is pretty low. If you fail, that can ripple through your entire career. Remember that the president of Harvard lost her job, in part, because of a mistake she made in a publication as a student. So you do not want to just go it on your own. The second reason you don't want to go it on your own, by the way, is nobody will believe you. Nobel Prize winning papers are never, or very rarely, solo publications. These are usually groups of people publishing, perhaps hundreds, publishing this work, because research is complicated and it takes a lot of effort and time and equipment and perhaps money and legal authority to conduct that kind of research. So the answer to your first question is easy. Don't do it. Don't do it on your own. There's nothing wrong with a passion project. That's super excellent. If your student's really into drones and has got some great work in mind, awesome. Nothing wrong with that. I would not couch that or present it as a research project. It probably would hurt their application. It just isn't realistic. The second question, finding a mentor. So if the answer to the first question is no, you can't get it on your own, then the answer to the second question is you must find a mentor. You must find a team, a partner, somebody to work with. You want an experienced mentor. I do not recommend choosing a graduate student or your mom's brother's best friend's son or anything like that. Choose somebody who has experience publishing, if that's your objective, is to publish, and has had many, many students, usually meaning they're a university professor. Which brings us to the third point. Do you have to pay for this? And should you pay for this? That's kind of a bigger question. The simple answer is no, absolutely no need to pay for this. There are thousands of faculty all over the US, Canada, and other places as well. Many of them would be willing to take you as a student in their lab, but you do need to be thinking about the fact that, for example, myself, as I mentioned, I'm a professor at Duke. I've been there about 20 years. I get 10 to 20 inquiries from high school students per day looking for space in my lab during the season. So that is the right way to do it. It is absolutely the right way to do it. But you really need to realize that there's a lot of competition for those jobs. You need to be really well prepared. I have a whole chapter on how to prepare yourself, and we can talk about it a little bit more as well if you want. But it's very difficult to do. The bottom line is it's very difficult to find a mentor. It's actually true in just about every area of life. Think about if you wanted to improve your tennis game. Yes, you probably could find somebody who just loves tennis and really wants to spend time with you and likes you and teaches you tennis. That's very difficult to do. The more likely scenario is you hire a tennis coach who is really good at it, who does it all the time, and does it as a profession. Which comes to finally the last part of the question you asked. In the end, if you're not able to find a free local opportunity with a professor in your area of interest, and that's what I recommend. Remember, I represent an organization, IRI, that does remote positions, but that's not what I recommend. What I recommend is a local experienced mentor who has openings in your lab that you're not paying for. But if you can't find that, you may have no choice but to go to one of the many placement services that will help you find a professor to work with. And then you do usually need to pay.
That is what, well, okay, so gosh, I was consumed with listening and taking that all in so that I kind of lost my question, but my next question is related to then when you put that on your resume, do you always need to say that you paid and the name of the program, or do you say you just did the research for? Is there a trick? Or, I mean, I know we're all about integrity here, but I just am curious if it matters to the reader, if it's somebody that you found, or if you are paying a program to help you learn how to research, a coach per se.
Sure, absolutely. It's a great question. So I think I mentioned to you, Laura, in the past, sometime when we met, that I did 2 years of admissions at Duke when I was associate director of undergraduate studies in engineering. So I saw a lot of, actually, an incredible number of applications. It's actually somewhat unbelievable how many applications we receive at Duke compared to the number of spots we actually have to accept. It's actually somewhat mind-boggling, but a lot of applications. So there's a couple of points to consider here. One is some placement agencies will tell you that it's simply an honor that they have accepted you in their organization. They have some remote research organization or on-campus program. It's almost certainly not true. Just the fact that you attend some research program on a campus, for example, at Duke or at Brown or Harvard or wherever, just the fact that you attended a summer program there or you were accepted to it, or a remote opportunity or almost anything, frankly, it's not enough. So just saying I was accepted is not reaching the threshold. The next question you asked is, well, what if you had to pay for that? What if you paid for the opportunity on Duke's campus? So what if you paid for the opportunity to do 8 weeks of research with somebody, whatever? It's kind of irrelevant. Doesn't really matter. What I'm looking for when I look at your application is, what impact did that have on you? What was your experience? How does that experience play into you as a larger person? You're telling me some story about yourself. You're presenting yourself. I may never get to meet you. Likely I will never meet you. So all I get is what you're presenting. This piece, how does it fit in to you as a person? What did you learn? What did you experience? What surprised you? What did you change? Rarely, actually, what did you accomplish? That is not actually that important in it. Few cases it is. Publishing might be one of those. But in most cases, it's what was your experience? How did it happen? How did you grow as a person? How does it fit into your story about yourself? So don't mention that you paid for it. We get it. You went to soccer camp and they charged you a fee to go to soccer camp. Well, that's what they do at soccer camp. I don't care. Now, if going to soccer camp, was a great experience for you, you really learned to be a leader, something monumental happened during soccer camp. Okay, well then I do care. Now tell me about that. Um, the kind of analogy I make, which doesn't work so well for high school students, but I think the parents can connect to it. If you get a job at Deloitte or IBM or Lenovo or wherever you get a job, you don't put monster.com on your resume. You put the job. You put that I had a job for 3 years, at FedEx in their management of logistics or whatever the job was. How you found the job is just not that relevant. And that's the same with students. Even if you're not going to use it as part of the application, for example, in an essay, perhaps during an interview, even if you're not going to do that, which maybe makes sense, then you just want to say, I was a research assistant in Joe's lab at Duke University or wherever it is. Mention the project, usually by name, and leave it at that. If you did have a major accomplishment, that would be a publication at a peer-reviewed, archived, impact factor-rated journal, or a presentation, typically at an international conference, a student conference, probably not so much, but an international conference. Those you would also mention as well. Those are major accomplishments. But the fact that you found the job because you paid so-and-so to help you, it's just not relevant. I would never mention it.
That's super helpful. What about, let's talk for a second about the time commitment. Like, what does this look like? And maybe it makes sense just for you to share like the program that you run and just tell us what it looks like for someone to apply, get accepted. What is the time frame, and what are the deliverables from that process for the student?
Yeah, great question, Laura. Another great question. So I divide the world of research into kind of two experiences. And this sort of goes throughout the rest of your life as well. One is short-term experiences. So that's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, perhaps 4 weeks, often done over the summer, though there's nothing special about doing it over the summer. Those are very valid experiences. There's nothing wrong with it. But keep in mind, doing a research experience over the summer has about as much impact as going to soccer camp in the summer. That is great. There's nothing wrong with doing soccer camp either in the summer, but you wouldn't expect your college application to be remarkably changed because you went to baseball camp over the summer, nor should you have the same expectation of a summer research. I just want to be clear, that doesn't mean those are bad experiences, especially if you're painting a whole picture. Perhaps you're very interested in, Arctic fungi, and so you spent, a summer in Alaska doing some research. You also did a biology project, and, you have 2 or 3 other things. Maybe you're doing a passion project around fungi at home or with a recycling center or something. So you're painting a whole picture. Of course, a summer doing research can be part of that picture and potentially a very effective part of that picture. But in general, you would think about these short-term experiences, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, as relatively minimal impact on a college application. You might produce a literature review. You might even go on to publish that in a junior science journal. Just keep in mind, those are not what universities are talking about when they talk about a publication. So don't claim that you have a publication if you put it in a junior science or private label journal. And if you have a mentor, they'll immediately be able to tell you the difference between those. But, that's kind of the end point, the literature review. And then the next level would be a much longer experience. Let's say 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, much more serious commitment, just as it would be for your life in soccer. If you're playing soccer for 3 or 4 years, that's a much more serious commitment than if you just went to soccer camp for the summer. And it's the same for research. You would expect, and in fact, it's true, a 3-year experience conducting research can have a significant impact on your college application. It could be something that you definitely write essays about, something that you definitely talk about at interviews, something that you definitely have an accomplishment from, a publication or a presentation at an international conference, something that you definitely grew from. So you as a person can express how you change your view of science or knowledge or perhaps yourself after that long experience. And so I separate kind of the world in research and how I think students should approach it into these two buckets. Is it a short-term experience or a long-term experience? It's a long-term experience. You do definitely have and should have an expectation of a significant impact. This should be something you really care about. This is for people who really want to spend a lot more time, but a lot more energy, a lot more of their intellectual output in something that they're truly passionate about. And a summer experience, which could be also awesome, but fits into a larger narrative.
I am so curious about if you have an example of a student who, like, you can trace for us. Like, the student started the summer after his sophomore year, they studied this, and the outcome was, I mean, do you have any of those kind of just really bring it to life kind of story for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me talk about Ishta. She was a student that I started working with when she was a junior in high school. And she was and remains today very passionate about asthma. She herself is a sufferer of asthma. And she was sent to school with a little inhaler thing to kind of stick in your mouth, to give it a squeeze, and it releases some medication, hopefully to cure short-term issues that asthmatics might be having. And she had a really excellent question. Okay, we sent me, in her case, but we send kids all the time to school with these meter dose inhalers, these little thingies. Do they know how to use them? And it turns out there's almost no data on that. There is very little understanding of whether we actually have students who know how to do that. So Isha joined my lab. She wrote a piece of software for a cell phone, smartphone, where the mother could record the child using the device. From the sounds that made, we could determine whether the child was using the device correctly. So we could both extract their breathing, because that made a sound, as well as the little clicks that the device makes when it's operated. And indeed, Ishta went on then to do some clinical data. So she actually extracted their charts from their labs. That she did during a gap year. So she graduated from high school and did a gap year to try to finish up the research. That wasn't the only thing she was doing during the gap year. She was also a passionate dancer, but she was doing this as well. And so she was able to extract the clinical data and indeed showed most kids, these are children, most of them have no idea how to use these meter dose inhalers. And she showed that it mattered. So she showed in their clinical record that those that did know how to use it better had better outcomes. So their asthma was better controlled. Longer sleeping, better sleeping, fewer asthmatic episodes, fewer wheezing episodes. So the training really does matter, but it's not very good. She went on to use that as part of her application to many schools, including Duke. She was very passionate about going to Duke. And she is now a student at Duke. So I still get to see her quite often. In fact, she didn't finish the publication, in fact, until she was a student at Duke. Though I had never met her, by the way, I never met her until she arrived on campus. And we were writing up the paper by then. So her physical presence wasn't required to do this work. It was all remote work. This work, furthermore, inspired her to become a doctor. So she now is pre-health at Duke. Also, she is a biomedical engineer, but she kind of lost, I wouldn't say lost faith exactly. Biomedical engineering isn't a religion. It's a major. But she sort of lost the belief that was the best way for her. So she actually designed her own degree, which is possible at Duke, and is now is actually a senior, so is in the process of graduating. So this is kind of a long story over many years now.
It come to life, right? And that students have bring their own individual interests and passions to some of these situations. I mean, and it's a great way for us to think about finishing up our 30 minutes together, but like, what are very specific steps for a student who wants to start a research project? And how do these students come up with these research questions or proposals? Are they coming to you with their original idea, or is part of the paying the coach to help students decide what those questions are?
Awesome question. So Uh, let's talk about the steps, because I think that kind of drives the rest of the answer to your question. The way that you get a job in a lab, especially if you're looking for a local professor with experience who's had many students, which is what I recommend, again, you do that by having a passion. So it's, I have students that are like 30 years old in my lab, postdocs who already have a PhD, they've been doing research for 10 years. There is no high school on the planet that's going to be able to compete with those students and their productivity in my lab. So I'm not taking high school students because I think they're going to get me my next big grant. I'm doing high school students because I feel education is important. I'm an educator. I want to teach people about research. I think knowledge and how we generate knowledge is awesome, and people should know about it. All of the faculty, just about all the faculty at IRI are volunteers. So they're clearly not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they're passionate about educating high school students. So how do you, I get 10, 20 a day. How do you stand out in that? Well, you stand out in that not by giving me your resume, because your resume is never going to impress me as much as a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old who's got, buckets of research experience. You do it by expressing your passion. So you got to bring your interest to the table, some genuine interest. I do find a lot of high school students get sort of hung up on this. They feel like they need to find, I guess they feel like they need to, it's somehow innate or something like that. But actually, that's not really true. Actually, when I talk to, especially high school students, they're already 16, they might be 17, sometimes 18. They're already choosing what YouTube videos they're watching. They're already choosing what Instagrams they're going to follow. They're going to already choose, who they like on TikTok. Some of that is fluff. We all watch somebody dancing some weird dance from time to time. But some of that is because they have true interests. They're following those things already. So those are the nascents, or those are the germs of a passion. And it's totally fine to have 2 or 3 of them. And it's totally fine to do it for a few years, and then you get to college or adulthood and you just don't like it anymore. That's totally fine as well. What's more important for this moment in the high school student's life is they have an interest. They have a passion that they can express, and that they can express to me. So that's really the key to finding the lab job. Most faculty will either give you a project around the passion or allow you some latitude within your passion for the project. Keep in mind, research often involves specialized equipment, specialized talents. So the chances that a professor would just accept any project, it's not that likely, but there's usually some negotiation. And you're absolutely right. There are coaches, and IRI is one of them, that offer projects called Find Your Passion or something like that. They are mostly, though, focused on finding and helping you express in a scientific way an interest or passion that you already bring to the table. And it is my belief and it is my experience. High school students have interests already. They're plenty old enough to have interests. Just developing that into a passion is quite acceptable, and it's not a lifetime commitment. You're not married to this. You just need to develop to the point where you can express it, enjoy it, and get something out of it.
That is a perfect way to end this. And I think the reason I feel like it's perfect is because you pointed out something that I think is so valuable, that our students, all the students that we serve, do have these incredible interests and passions already built within them. They're, like you said, they have preferences. They have things that they're excited about. One of the stories I have that I think I really relate to this is I had a student for like 2 years who I was meeting with. And I one day I just was like, okay, let's just stop talking about all this school stuff. And can you just, for once, just tell me, like, what do you do for fun? Right? Like, and she went into this whole thing, and I'd known her for a long time. She was actually a family friend, so it wasn't just the consulting arrangement. But she finally was like, well, this doesn't really matter, but I have a YouTube channel where I teach people how to wear makeup, because underneath all of this, during COVID, she was like, underneath all of this, I actually have quite a bit of acne. And I have been learning how to make, but I also have been playing around in the kitchen with my own formulas. And I'm like,
okay, very cool.
Oh my gosh, right? Like, that's awesome. Here the whole time. And she ended up writing her whole personal statement about it. And it was just so lovely. And it wasn't like she was trying to get into chemistry. I'm nothing like that, but it was like within you are these things, and it's okay to have them, and it's okay if they feel somewhat ordinary. It's okay.
Mhm.
It's just, don't be afraid to it doesn't have to be some extraordinary thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have so many people not going into research, because they think they have to have some big unique answer, right? To, or question or something, that makes them feel like
Right.
they stand out. We're always asking these kids to stand out, when really you're just saying is what will make you stand out is your innate curiosity. And what a gift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bring that to the table. That is what you bring to the table. Don't let the rest of it worry about you. The big accomplishment isn't the thing. The passion is the thing.
I love it. Well, we did it. It is 30 minutes. We accomplished.
Great.
I love talking to you. I hope we can do this every year. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. And
Thank you, Laura.
as I told you, your amazing book that was on my desk for literally 3 months now is not here for me to show off, but we did put it in the chat. So please, everybody, purchase this book. It's an absolute gem and should be on everybody's high school students' kitchen table. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.